excited to see you all here. I'm Zach Anderson, fifth-year PhD candidate in the creative writing program. I'm just going to play MC for a minute, and then Maxime Berclaz is going to come up and introduce our featured poet. We'll save a few minutes for questions and conversation after the reading, and then stick around too because we'll have some refreshments afterward, books for sale, you can get them signed even, and we have the space until 9 for us to just mingle and chat. So this is the Diann Blakely Visiting Writer Reading Series, and it's fairly recent. It started last year with Allison Cobb's visit, so we're excited to be able to continue this initiative. I have a few acknowledgments to make before I bring Maxime up here. First of all, Aditi, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We're really excited to have you here. Thanks for braving the trip from the Atlanta airport in the rain. We're grateful to Athica for hosting us and Lauren Fancher for facilitating this event. I'm also really proud of the work that my fellow creative writing program grad students put in to make this happen. The planning committee, Maxime Berclaz, Eric Brown, Colin Bishop, put in just the key legwork to make this event happen. I also want to recognize Jamie Mays, the creative writing program assistant, who helped with everything that was above our pay grade. And the Georgia Review, shout out to Gerald Ma, Aria Curtis, and Leslie Coffey. We had a book sale fall through, and so the Georgia Review came through at the last minute to make sure that we had books here. So buy books. And one final note about the funding source for this event. The Diann Blakely Endowment to the University of Georgia Creative Writing Program, housed in the English department, works to fund visiting poets, and we're really grateful for having that funding source to make these opportunities happen. And now I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Maxime Berclaz to do the intro.
First, I'd just like to say thank you all so much for coming out, especially considering the weather. And a huge thank you to Zach Anderson, who's absolutely, I would say, instrumental part of the planning committee. We get a round of applause for him. It's my incredible honor to introduce Aditi Machado. Aditi Machado writes thickets of sound, of affect, of wind, thickets of goods, of prosody, of fabric, of value, use or otherwise, of abstraction and concretion, of travel, of grammar, of jewels, of inside and outside, crumbled across and within and against each other. These are thickets of sensation. In her first book, Some Beheadings, which was the winner of the Believer Poetry Book Award, and it's available for sale here, Machado opposes the thicket to the volta, that is to say, to the poetic turn. And in her essays on poetics and with her general practice, she moves through and past the model of the epiphanic closure that this kind of operation implies. Rather than the signal of an ending, the arrival in port a volta announces, Machado casts the epiphany back to its etymological roots, which, as she informs us in her essay at the end, can mean to come suddenly into view. Machado forms the epiphany into the horizon. It's not banished, but rather becomes something that we can take in and pass by. It's determinate precisely because the poem keeps going into indeterminacy, because we can catch its other face in the rearview mirror. In this sense, Machado's writing embodies and builds upon the possibilities described by the late and very much mourned Linda Ginny. This writing is, among other things, a mode of prosody, one that works not only with accent and syllable, its articulated psychosomatic rhythm, but it recruits image, line, and syntax for its production. It is the prosody of travel, the turn as the bending of the road or route, the dip and rise of the desert, the folds of the ocean. And in this, it manifests an ongoingness of sensation, a sensation of ongoingness that is in itself a coming into view of a modified sensorium. Within this capacious verse lies the quickening of a consciousness to perception, as Machado puts it in her essay, This Touch, an intelligence of the senses marked by its affinity with touch. Machado's writing is, in the thicket of form and content, a socially engaged poetics. The haptic thinking, this kind of sensation, intelligence of touch that emerges from this profusion is one profoundly attentive to the contradictions of capitalist society and the fascist subjectivities it breeds. Nowhere is this more evident than in her latest full collection, Emporium, winner of the James Laughlin Award, also available for sale here, where the enumeration and deformation of the titular marketplace gives sense to the allure of exchange. With this sense comes not only its corresponding organ, the experience of its formation by historical dynamics, but also the pleasure of it, the seduction of the market. Here Machado aids our grasping of the utopian kernel of merchant capital, the novel psychosoma corresponding to the world of commodities and their abstraction in the most concrete of fashions. Of course, this is just one sliver of what Machado's writing does. And of course, we have the good fortune to see this for ourselves because we have her here with us tonight. Yet, in the brief interval before, take a moment not only to reflect on our luck, but also to prepare for the particular sensory mode these poems invite us to, place us in, and even as they help us grasp the present, consider in what manner they let us also trace the negative space of the future. Aditi Machado is a poet, translator, and essayist. Her works, other than those mentioned above, include a translation from the French of Farid Tali's Prosopopoeia and several chapbooks, the most recent of which are a long poem called Now from Sputnik Fizzle in 2012. Machado's work appears in journals like Bomb, Lana Turner, Volt, Chicago Review, Western Humanities Review, and Jacket 2. Former poetry editor of Asymptote from 2011 to 2019, she works as an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati. Please join me in welcoming Aditi Machado.
Can you guys hear me okay? Thank you so much, Maxine. That was an incredibly comprehensive and beautiful introduction. Thank you for reading so much of all the little things that the world has allowed to exist that came out of me somehow. Thank you also, Zach, my very good friend from a long time, and also I know you from when you edited my translation of Prosopopoeia, and all the grad students involved in putting this together, the faculty at UGA, Andrew and Maggie both have been people that I've followed and interacted with in many ways. It's been really wonderful to meet you in the flesh and converse with you and eat with you. And definitely a second and much deserved shout out to Jamie. It's been wonderful. There's always somebody like Jamie in a department. We have our own at UC, and indispensable and wonderful. Thank you. I very much hope I did not forget to mention anyone. There's, I know, a lot of labor, visible and invisible, involved in putting these together. I feel like there's needs to be also a shout out to the high school kids who made this space look cool. All right, I'm just gonna check the time. All right, great. So I am gonna read from the two poetry books that Maxine mentioned and some new work. And I'll start with the first book that's called Some Beheadings, and then read a little bit from my book that's coming out later this year, and then I'll end with Emporium. I find it hard to, I need to end, it's just exhausting to read sometimes from that book. All right, Some Beheadings. It was very, very easy to pick which poems to read from this book. And that's because, shout out to my sister-in-law, Suman, who's here. And I'm going to read a set of poems that come under this title, Rude Western Cats. So now you know why I mentioned this. So these were, this is the first time I met Suman. I guess my brother and her just started dating, and they were doing this amazing research project in the Western Ghats, which are a mountain range along the southwest border of India, and parts of it are just super dense rainforest. And my brother insisted that I come out there, even though I'm not necessarily known for my ability to brave the elements. And it was a hard monsoon, like raining. Like this rain is nothing. Like, what would you say, like 20 times this? And like relentless. And there were some leeches, and there were some interactions with leeches. And so these 3 site-specific poems came out of that. Rude Western Ghats. Leech country. As within the raucous meditations of high priests, you find yourself moving and trepidatious, and in the far black, moving black trees. For once when I say you, I mean you, the morphology pristine. You may not think there is anything particular to you, but you may also not think. Somehow, volume is more believable when the leech makes love to you, when you deplete. Many days go by, undoing the central light motifs of your life. You have no nature, only wilderness. This is what it is like may not be said. This is what it is not like neither. You take your apophasis and your deliquescence, and when it rains like this, you have felt everything. Petrichor, petrichor, you call, wishing for a way to always be seed. Hill station. The top of this hill is called a viewpoint, but is not figurative. We've made a philology of it, which is immaculate, which is, as we now are, figural. Lemongrass on the slopes grows wild wind through it. The trellises are in place, the fences called eyes. There are rivers in the distance that milk, and we graze and check the motorcycle as it stays upon the slope, and we grow wild on the point through the downward sloping lemongrass and the notional. There are moments in which the condition of the mind approaches the condition of the body, which we call ecstasy, which now occur. Strangler fig. Somewhere deep, darkness is parapet to acts of survival. The strangler prospers in this heat, multiplying its arms. As one who does not, who listens, who analogizes, who is the analyst of events so quickly occurring as to be historical, what is left save to be consumptive? It is rich, and my prolific hands alert. There would be berries, there would be wood, finite oniric reflections by the water, by the trees straining light. I agree on the premise of the forest. I agree on the appropriate sounds asphyxiating. Somewhere deep, language sexualizes its horror over how it may be infiltrated, is body where speech is movement, and all you can do is move. Somewhere deep, giddiness is lux, and air, which I need air and light, like poverty, disappear. And the choker like an aroma surrounds, like ornament sits. And to be giddy, you must have eaten, you must have breathed. There are berries, and there is wood. No passive recipients in a peaceful and fagus world. This one's called Speeches Minor. inwardly. Infinite rose, peeled, and bliss. I walk as if moving will evaporate, as if scent. Discomfort moves in the body like discourse between sea and moor. The bad weather turns terminal. I think toward the sky and the bellies of underground creatures. This makes a dense paragraph of mist. Inside mist, what you see is neither truth nor untruth, but discussion rising into dissolution. In a kernel, I admit I am deeply, but have not yet found my apathy. Sun bounces off railway tracks, ancient ritual of geometry. By the tracks opens a flower, refrain. The flower is general and particular and ancient. It satiates the erasure of a palm. There is a richness in saying everything we know. There is a richness in saying everything we know. The flower has opened a disparity in the earth that is granular. Refrain. In the medial moments, like a closing couplet, I said one thing and then another into a colosseum or a seashell. I think of feeling as an act of purity. That I wind through cornfields and feel rustlings is incalculable. Though I have acted out of purity, I have not felt thought. Thought is not open to me, though I sense it from the edge of a field, watching the horses and the horses' masters. I have not been a slave to kindness. I watch horizons like blades. I watch the gorgeous animal of movement and its whip. I watch the gorgeous plant of movement and its whip. I cannot tell time without the whip. The whole village was there, minus its people. So as you can tell, I don't have too many things to say in between poems. And I'm really just reading 2 poems from each book, but they are long poems, so I totally get it. People just like drift in and out. But I will, let me see. What can I say about this next thing that I'm going to read from? So this is from a book that's, I'm calling it Material Witness, and very hard time trying to preface it, except I'll just say that the other title that I came up for it was Material Witnesses, plural, which, as everyone who I consulted told me, doesn't sound too good, but the only reason I liked it is because material witnesses could be the verb for like material witnessing. But we ended up with material witness, and I'll read not the entire long poem, but a section from that titular poem, slightly adapted for Athens. Material witness. It's Friday. There's a band playing in the rain, losing its distinction. You film it. A speculative wind blows through your instruments. Coats fly open and blood boats. The weather reports itself to a dead vertical left. You film less out of sorrow than out of deference for the nonce of this music. It is a bomb. It is a wet day full of plum debts. Yesterday was less wet. You were visited by a pure circumpupillary green that hurt your eyes. Sometimes experience is phenomenal in its segues. Do you remember you were peeling a turnip? That was some vegetable-colored sky toward which, stupefied, you grew. You became its bespoke leak. You were thinking something the climate kept controlling toward excess. This is what it is like, you thought, listening to the assignations of trees. Meanwhile, you would not eat the turnip. Meanwhile, you sat on a tuffet. Meanwhile, you earned a degree handed to you from a helicopter in the sky. Then there was the day before that, and the day before that, and on, concatenating your sense of being absent design. Then came night at a slant and slit your mineral bosom. Proverbial curtain, except it sliced instead of fell clean through the fat of you, doctor, nurse, patient, chaplain of time's bitter continuity. Then, in matters of taste, you became sensible. Rare bottles brought out from the cellar dug up your non-dominant tongue, for which there was a map inscribed on a low patch of kitchen wall, chipped paint pointing to its location in bad faith. This was a period of decay. No, this was when you forked out opinion. Your cruelty, uniform, kicked in it. You wrote a definition against how it was yesterday. Could it be you were divided into a body politic? Could it be you'd assumed governance, subjection, rebellion, pastoral care, agrarian rights? You released obscenity as from the fibrous heart of artichoke, a quill. Emergent wines, dated wines, you drank them all. You could not, you would not be touched. Then there was no motion. Then it picked up again, the always, already, etc. rejects, your stamina of compost. It was like things deferred their freedom to you. No, it was their kinetic enchantments. Haunted in an old mining town turning private investment. Haunted in its distinct odor of data, the labored sound of its pipes, in the absence of culture, in the reduction and juice of it. You spat on the inklings of flowers. Death to suburbia, and you began to think again, militantly aroused, resident alien of every which nowhere. Once it had been written, sacred means saturated with being. You spoke that zone into obliteration, lying out of an abundance of caution in untimely grasses. You could have had visions. You could have had anything you wanted by means of indiscretion increasingly pervade in those final years in which lyric was put before all. Lyric tea, lyric rant, lyric mass shooter, give yourself up, except you couldn't, not to the accountants, not to the heightened scrutability of the land, heights you'd fall off of. Then an opaque zone where darkness bled. Impossible to extract confessions when they're spilling already everywhere. Then bloodless darkness, descent. Trust nothing. The sun is president. How are people doing? Doing okay? Okay. Okay, this next one is also from the new book, and it's one I've not read aloud too often, just once before. And I'll tell you the same bad joke that I told then, which is this is my one confessionalist poem, which the joke being is I don't write confessionalist poems. Okay. Okay. Bent record. In starlight and in the hum of typing, I admit it was I. I admit it was I who erased the posters in the mean street, and it was I who found the body. It was also I who discovered the plant, and I who named it imperially after my own self. Then I ironed out the language, and I showed my work in the cruddy journals of the time. It is not the case that wax had dripped upon the pillow. This was not the sign. But it is that I invested public monies in a variant distance off the shore in which the lighthouse seemed a tallow stick. I did indeed compose the philosophy and did so in broad daylight bearing its illegible whips. In this way, I aroused complexity in myriad roses. Oh, pity the wild geranium and the dense, blazing star. But to return to that night, indeed it was I who witnessed the overwhelming need and precedence of summer as it received one into a vexed relation with the cooling effects of trees. It was I who circulated the yellow memo, and I who poisoned the well. And I established the literature, knowing full well the problems of the real world to a less real one exquisitely apply. Thus it was I of whom it was said, she availed of little caution. I came to surmise on the porch of autumn with citrus discs and beads of solar attrition. I was akimbo, I was inclined to fly, a flicker of madness. I had achieved my historic high, and I knew just enough to be toxic to the earth. In the raw bar of moonlight, I projected my one feeling, which littered the street and mobilized dawn, and the sun came down its high metaphor and distended the body's odor, and it was I who said, something is rotten in the state. For in such palaces as these, one is armed with barbs to the teeth. And yes, I darkened the web, and I defrauded the publican, and on stormy nights, I withheld from classification those very secrets which pierce the hearts of young historians. Indeed, it was I to whom it was said, slow the fuck down, and I did not. I lived in directionless desire, intransigent, bullish. I ventured out in viral fields, and I rode my bad scooter, which killed the coral reef. I withdrew my affections, which bolstered certain militias, and I suffered publicly excesses of feeling, which eliminated the most well-bred of my rivals. It was under these circumstances that I came to speak for the Republic. And this in the hot sun which burned to a cinder, the very thing I sought to make you forget, and forget you have, drinking the choicest of my ales. And yet, I have done only some of what I could do to secure my freedom. Of nuance, I am the consequent animal. Unsubtle, I live in intricacies of the obvious, into which I permit your entry. For indeed, yes, over this too, I maintain a modicum of power. I'm going to do an unprofessional thing and just go and get my water, which I meant to professionally carry the books. Doing the math. So I'll read my two poems from the book Emporium, and this is that. This is the. I don't know if it will be the only book like this where I actually have an answer to the question, "What is your book about?" I don't know about other writers in the room. I feel like that's the worst question to get, and very hard to answer, and it's not that my answer is accurate, it's just that I can just sort of be like, this is a book that, I explore markets, and I think about money and capitalism, and there's a lot of silk in it, so there are like specific things that I can say in that kind of way, and it's worked much better than when people have asked me what like Some Beheadings was about, and one time I said landscape, and this person looked so disappointed. Something, I don't know, there's something sexier about like markets and money and so on. It's been a few years since the book's been out, and I also think of like, what are some of the other starting points for the book that feel truer, because I'll read, the two poems I'll read now are the later poems that I wrote, so I did indeed have like money and markets, so all of that stuff, and some of the research behind it in mind, but in terms of the actual composition, there's so much that happens that's really not, it is not that it is not that kind of semantic answer that you give. And one of the notes that I found in my notebook was I had a list of words with a hard C in it, and so I think I was partly following the hard C of the word aspic. So a poem's called Experiment with Aspic, but there are a number of other hard C words that you might hear, including lac, as in LAC, which is it's a resinous secretion from certain trees, and it's a big industry from India where I'm from. And so it's what you would use in the production of like lacquer and shellac, stuff like that. And it wasn't, I really don't think this was on my mind, but much later it occurred to me that we also have the word lac, as in L-A-K-H. Lac is, as far as I know, only used in the Indian subcontinent for, it's like 100,000 is a lac. So people, rather than say like they have 100,000 rupees, they'd be saying, I have a lac. And it's something that I realized much later. Okay. So this is that poem, and not really important, but I guess it is a specific marketplace that that I would go to with my mother and like carry the vegetables that she was haggling over and buying. Okay. Experiment with aspic. It commences. Here it is endless, mostly poverty, parallel to the railway track, manure, procession, conniptions. It is crisp, a labyrinth. It is here it commences, lac, it is said, or albumin, gourds, chikus, comprehensions of ripeness, what's fresh, what's not, under the same feckless auspices. Luxury, it is said, moves sometimes at midday. Mellow the light cast on such euphemistic striations. On the goat hooks up ahead, on the garlands up ahead, the muffled scene of death to which the lines proceed, curved. Citrus curling up the light, so tart it is. But here where it commences, here from where the lines endless proceed, here the voices, here the prices, lacquer on this produce, surreal photography, tainted reverie. Nothing clean yet, presence implied, not seen. It proceeds. An extreme intelligence can be held in the hands, is. Slight burn from the citrus, slight build from up the ground. Euphemism for shanty, euphemism for indigence. Skinny body, slender bean, sturdy drumsticks, snap. Nothing clean, yet the causal knives luxuriate. Lone jackfruit, abandoned beehive, nightshade in terror of being shook. The lymph is anxious. The child rears her ugly head, slow capacity for memory. Lacquer, she says, lacquer on this. This kind of traffic is difficult to curb. Her skin is light, her mother's translucent. This is how it begins, the acts of comprehending things, softening into the basket, plastic, the voiceless hellos, a tendency, hushed. An impossible sculptural aspect, her eyes laminate. Things mature along this aisle that's endless. And she too, in the town called Fraser, opposite the police station and the pork shop, parallel to the railway track, she too developed symptoms, hysteria, depression, a deviant sexualized mesmerism. She told us, not without resistance, that she had had an education. Her mother spoke the apt languages. She said nothing but lacquer on this. The brain like a jelly, something trapped in it. She views it with her double eye, its glittering mound of curvatures, lipid rich broth. We call it in the vulgar gelatin. We will return to this point later. For the child rears her head to the sound of community, which she hears as tribe, later mafia. She appears to comprehend, but she does not, the sorrow of haggling. Whether she might come to say it, let's not ensure, but it is here it commences. The thickenings of lymph, the persistent shyness, the passions, it is endless. As symbol, luxury she finds and poverty are the same. She listens prodigally. Correlatives appear, disappear. She lacquers them. But poverty, she finds, is in act and thought, a word to her not otherwise permitted, real. Articulacy, then, was of elbows and knees. The spirit never quite levels between her mother and the woman on the blue tarp, but they touch hands. The mother communes with nearly everyone. The child rears her ugly head, quizzical, recrudescence that's luscious, shutting down institutes. Speak, she says, speak, my heart is gelatin. If anything Lux is, it is this severe, unthinkable audio. Palatial, she says. In futures glorious and systematic, the word atelier will come to describe this pure fragment, this collapse of lines, curvatures, she thinks, conniptions, the dusty colloidal elegance, she thinks, of air. She views it with her double eye, sculptural aspect. A powdery substance overlays things, steady music. It is here she comes to comprehend, tender, later smell it. We call it in the vulgar, money. She speaks. The humors reside not in, but a quarter of an inch away from her, settling sometimes as sweat. She was extraordinarily vulnerable, with not even a rotten core. What might coerce her to nostalgia? Hot tea, chilled jelly dissolves. No quality here. It is nothing, and the saw. The recrudescence is luscious, shuts down law. It began as tendency, petty crime, delirium of touching, passion of the silk, subjective correlatives, desire, dark wishes, ossifications, and abbreviations of sound, the refusal to dance, the turning away inside the apostrophe. Meditative processional, it got heavy. She lacquered it. She viewed it with her vulgar eye. She lacquered it. No delicacy obtained. She put it away in its pure future, glittering mound, the opposite of hot tea and a biscuit. Lacquer on it, endless mostly, difficult to discern, the conniptions, cognitions. This kind of traffic is difficult to curb, but no, it did not affect her. No one was spirited away. This was not the meadow in which she grew. No one haggled, no one withdrew. It was as a lacquer on her. I'm gonna end there.